Welcome to the Swim Swam podcast. I'm your host, Coleman Hodges. Joining us today, he's an NCAA champion, NCAA All-American for the USC Trojans, and most recently, a member of the U.S. national team in bobsled for the 2022-23 season. Here to explain all of this and explain his exploits in the last couple of years athletically and professionally, hopefully, we're sitting down with Carsten Vissering. How's it going, man?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing well. I'm excited to get answers because this article came out and everyone was just kind of like, wait, what? Yeah. So just first off, take us through this journey of how you got into bobsled, ultimately ending up on the national team, and why you are pursuing this new sport now.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy journey. I mean, a lot of it's been hard work, but to be honest, so many things that have just lined up were almost like fate or circumstance or luck. So a lot of those variables have been in my favor to help me land in exactly the position where I am today, which is on the U.S. national team roster for 2022 to 2023. But to bring it back, I guess I don't want to bring it too far, but I'd say it really kind of started with the idea in my head. The inception began in, I'd say, junior to senior year of college at USC. And part of that came when I really experienced I guess, significant improvements, not only in the pool as far as some of my times, but a big, I guess, variable or factor that I relied on for performance was the weight room. And that doesn't just mean weights. Weights was a big factor, but plyometrics, explosiveness, even when we were in the pool, as we progressed from my freshman to senior year, the amount of distance I would do in season, of course, usually early on, we have higher degrees of volume. That would shorten too, to the point where later on in my career, like sometimes a hard practice might be we do an XYZ. I'd do warm up and then my set might be 350s, 325s, and then like 315s, but I'd get my parachute on and rip the core to like full coning, as we'd call it, where you just have maximal resistance. So there was just kind of like an evolution of my training. And I came from a high school club where yardage was very, very high in volume. I trained with Yuri Sugiyama, Bruce Gemmell, and John Flanagan. And all of them, Gemmell, he probably puts, I'd say like the 500 is like the foundation that practices kind of revolve around. With Yuri, he was a big fan of the 200 IM. Flanagan, he structured everything pretty much a lot of 400 IM centric workouts. So for the most part, volume was high. And once I got to USC, and Dave's pretty renowned for it, but the volume dropped significantly. I noticed increased performance in the weight room. It was during that time, and when we're in the summer, competitions is a little bit different than short course. I was probably ramping up my power training, explosive training, and then it was during that time I really, number one, saw improvements in that, was doing some research, because when I was home training, I was Googling stuff about power exercises. I came upon something about, top bobsled exercises. It led me to bobsled combine. By that time, it was like probably my junior year of college. I was hitting big numbers. So I was like, I want to see what I can do. What are some power workouts? I think I hit about 350 pounds in the clean by that time. Squatted 500 pounds my right before season, like junior year. So I was really into it. And sometimes, I mean, I loved our power exercises, but like the weight room would be one of my favorite times in the week. So I'd say that was when things really started. And then after I had a super senior year, my fifth year. Not many people know this because I got rid of some of my social media a little bit after graduating, or during that time. I don't think I was active, but that year, so that was, what was it? That was like the year when the pandemic started. Sorry, like the past 2 years are a little jumbled together. But during that year, I just finished my swimming eligibility, but because of a study abroad semester off, which I can touch on that because that was a big time of like weights training, and my redshirt semester to train for trials in 2016. during that year, I was still a student, but I wasn't on the team. I was doing a little bit of volunteer coaching with the team, tried to help with starts and stuff, which was a lot of fun. But it was just basically, I guess, my meathead year. I got super strong in weightlifting. I ended up getting up to like repping out 500 pounds in the back squat, like below parallel reps, so deep reps. And I just kind of maximized those numbers. And that kind of got me to this point where, like, okay, well, I've hit these numbers. My athleticism is going down a little bit. I'm just kind of a meathead. Like, what's it going to go to? Like, I think it's just the natural athlete, me being a swimmer, being a competitor my whole life. But I was like, something, I got to take it to the next level. I don't find just going to the gym and being a meathead is enough of a meaningful outlet for this. As fun as it is. And I met a lot of my good friends literally in that 5th year just from doing that from like the USC powerlifting club. But that kind of got me on a path or on a search for what am I going to put this to? It seems to be more power. Like it felt almost wasted if this was just going to be like I was just going to be like a gym rat with all this stuff, because I had a high vertical, I had a high squat. I was like, well, it seems almost wasteful to not put this to something. And that's when I started looking for different outlets, and I got into bobsled because I did a big evaluation. And obviously, like the elephant in the room is, why didn't I like stick with swimming at the time? Because I was still talented in that. I could have continued. And I mean, USC swimming was great. I had a great time the entire time. Like I loved every moment of it. I'm super close with a bunch of my teammates. It reinvigorated. I wasn't not near like burnout to the degree that I want to stop the sport, but I mean, with the high yardage in high school, morning workouts, I went to a pretty rigorous high school where they just demanded a high workload. I mean, it was hard. And USC really revitalized that for me. I think the shakeup in training, something that catered to my talents a little bit more, or how I like to train. So that brought it back. But I was after graduating my senior year, I was ready to move on to something, and I think this kind of kicked a new spark and something that I could put my drive to. And I mean, once I got back off the plane from NCAA's to USC, I think the next day I was in the weight room at USC, like maxing out my power snatch. So I was on it to like keep it going. And at that time, like I said, I was still focused on gym numbers, wasn't necessarily focusing on bobsledding. But so what brought me into bobsledding was, okay, I had to look around. I was like, what is something that I could realistically get to a competitive level in? I mean, you can't like with something like football or rugby, which is very power, like power is a huge component of the sport. And a lot of rugby, American football athletes are incredibly powerful. I mean, you've got the skills component, which you just can't pick that up like that. You develop like skills in ball sports over decades of playing them. I played club rugby at USC for a little bit, which was a lot of fun. I think I looked more intimidating than how good it actually was, but that was a good time to just play that. But when I really did like my evaluation of, okay, for what's next, that's when I found bobsled is something that I've got the talents for it. One, like I've got strength, I've got explosiveness, speed's still something I'm working on even to this day. That's the top thing I need to improve on. But those are the critical importance of what you need to be a bobsled pusher. And then the skill curve, and I'll get into it when I talk about like pushing on ice, it's kind of like the 50 free. You'd think that like bobsled pushing is like, oh, someone can just grab a prowler sled and as hard as you drive into it. No, there's a big technical component in what makes like a whole degree of how you essentially push. It's not, that'd be like the same statement as like saying, oh, well, if you just like Tarzan drill, like the faster you spin your arms in a 50 free, the faster you're going to go. It's not necessarily the case. But so I say that to say there is a skill curve, but however, that skill curve is completely different than like picking up a ball sport. So it was a combination of, I had a drive to do something more. I had a lot of talent that I didn't want to go to waste. And I did an evaluation of where's something that I might be able to come in at a higher level realistically. I mean, saying, oh, I'm going to try out for the NFL, or I'm going to be pro, I don't know, shot putter or something. Well, that unfortunately is kind of unrealistic in the time frame. I mean, once you're already in your mid-20s, you're already starting to get on the descending aspect of your ability to develop new sports skills. So I hope that kind of gives a basic run through.
Definitely. That was a very thorough run through. Thank you. For a couple follow-up questions before we get more into the bobsled aspect. Was the ISL ever a consideration for you? I know you said you wanted to be done after 2019 NCs, which I can't remember the exact timeline, but I think that's kind of when it was coming up. Did you ever consider ISL, or did you ever get approached to potentially join an ISL team?
So I was never approached. Now, to be fair, I didn't have social media like I think mid 2020s when I cut it. So maybe that I wasn't that there's no way for them to contact me. But it's funny you said, because I mean I talked with Dave about after trials being like, well, I think I'm gonna retire. But he would always be like, wait, 50 breasts, maybe you should just go to some of these ISL meets and rip a 50 breasts. And that I've got no opposition to. I had one of my good friends over last night and we were talking about this. And he was like, well, do you think if like they made the 50 breasts like an Olympic event or something like that, you probably would have continued through? And I'm like, realistically, that's probably true. That probably would have extended my career in swimming after, say, they like made 50 breasts in an Olympic event. I would say that probably would have extended it. Earlier this year, I mean, I actually did. My dad is probably like one of my biggest swim fans. I don't think there's a single meet, at least up until high school, some college ones he was able to make all the big championship meets, but he like never really missed a big meet. But he constantly will be in the back of like, we'll random like, hey, 50 breasts, do you want to make a little? So I'm living in Los Angeles now. Rent's expensive, food's expensive. He was like, hey, why don't you go race some 50 breasts? So if ISL was like still, because I think it's like on hold right now or something. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
the investor with Ukraine, because I did look into that. So my knowledge of that is proof that it was on my mind and it wasn't ideas. But I do believe that if there was an opportunity to, and I was talking to my dad, I was like, well, I'd have to look at what their obligations are, what their requirements are and stuff. But I mean, because right now bobsledding's everything. But I mean, I did alumni relays and I think I did 23.5 in my 50 breast, which isn't too far from like a dual meet thing. My problem is I like dived in and went straight down. So I was practicing in the pool like the day before, and it's like my first time touching like a pool in like 2 years. And I was like I was like pushing up the wall, and I can't remember, I might be off. It was like maybe like 12 seconds for like 25 breaths. So I was like, oh, so that's like what I remember going like before NCAAs. But I forgot to practice to start. And then I go in and I like feel myself go straight down with all my momentum lost. So I'm like, well, if I can do that right now, maybe a few like once or twice a week of brushing things off with all the power. Cause I mean, 50 breast is so power dependent. I feel like of all swimming events, the one that like can be maintained with like the lowest amount of like swimming would be the 50 breast compared to like everything else. So to answer your question, if like a team was flexible and was like, hey, if you just want to show up every once in a while to rip a 50 breasts and understand that I've got competing stuff, yeah, and absolutely, I'd be probably down to do something like that. And alumni realize it's a lot of fun.
Nice. I mean, that sounds totally fun. We'll put the word out to all the teams. Carsten Vissering available for a 50 breast. Did you only do that one relay at the USC relays?
Yeah, well, I would have done another one had I like. I just think I forgot. We didn't. Our relay didn't sign up for the freestyle one. I don't want to call out the guys, but I think they were kind of tired just from the medley, and they didn't sign us up. And I was like, oh, I'll be down. But yeah, we did a medley relay, and then we had a freestyle one after. I had a lot of lactic acid after that 50 breast, so I don't think that 50 free would have been that remarkable. So.
What do you
But
think you could go in like a fresh 50 free right now? Your freestyle is pretty good, right?
I was able to just like muscle through a 50 free and kind of get away with it a little bit, maybe a 20 point, just because I'm still powerful. And it's not like for me, the diminishing factor of my 50 free was not the technique. It's not like, oh, I have relied on my technique to make me fast. I relied on my power. So the technique is diminished, but like that's not going to be the limiting factor. I mean, I think Catherine Vogt and Yuri, or Catherine Case, sorry, they nicknamed my like freestyle stroke the gorilla stroke. And I literally at the end, I remember my senior year or junior year, I had at the end of a Saturday practice, Alex Valente and I had a duel that was like forced on us in the well, 200 free to see who was the slowest freestyler on the team. And
Oh
we both
no.
at the last second, but I just say that not to rip on Alex because he's got a lot of talent, but just to say that like my freestyle was just more of a thrash and just relied on power. So I to answer your question, if I had to like do a 50 free right now, I think I probably wouldn't be that far off from what I did like in season, which I think was like 19 high. So probably fall like 20 point.
Gotcha. Yeah, nice. Okay, so let's bring it back to bobsled. So you do this evaluation of sports you could realistically perform at a high level on. You land on bobsled, then what? Right? How do you go about pursuing bobsled at a high level, and what does that look like for you now that you've made the national team?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do my best to answer like in as much depth as possible. However, this is really like my first year. Like I did my rookie camp at the end of August, so this is very, very new to me. So I'm gonna do my best. So you can look up some of the information online. A lot of it's publicly available, but like I said, so I'm gonna do my best. I might get something a tiny bit wrong, but like I said, I'll do my best. So essentially, there's a couple ways to get into the bobsled teams. If you say, oh, today I'm going to make my goal of getting on the Team USA roster at bobsled. So the first way is you have to do a combine, essentially. And it's similar to, you know, how the NFL, they'll do their combines and pro day combines. For the bobsled combine, you do a 45-meter sprint. However, that 45-meter sprint is broken up into 4 events. The whole combine is 8 events, and each are 100 points. So kind of like a decathlon, essentially. So the 45-meter sprint, they take your 15-meter split, they take your 30-meter split, your 45-meter split, your 45-meter time, and then the 30-meter fly, which is that split between your 15 and your 45, which typically gauges your top speed. And then you do the second part of the combine, which will be a underhand shot put toss, which is about 16 pounds. You do a standing broad jump. You do a power clean, 1 rep max, and then a back squat, 3 rep max. So those are the combine events. If you were to go to a combine, you do those, and your score, based off of your score, will help determine your recruitability and your talent, essentially. Or you could do a combine like virtually, which is similar events. I think they just do the 40-yard dash, and you could put together like an athletic highlight tape. That's what I ended up doing, though I've done the full combine, because regardless, at some point you have to do the combine, because that basically becomes a recruitability tool, and that affects your funding as an athlete if you score high enough on the combine. So we'll take an athlete, Joe X. And so Joe X is doing the combine. He scored 700 points on the combine, which is those 8 events. Then he'll get invited to rookie camp. And rookie camp is when you go out to Lake Placid at the Olympic Training Center. So the winter OTC is actually in Lake Placid, New York, which is far upstate New York. It's beautiful little town. If you ever go there for vacation, it's all lakes and forests and mountains, but that's where the winter sports train. So they've got dry land. They've got it looks like on a little train rail, like a little push cart. And then they've got an ice house, imagine like the refrigerated room in Costco, where there's a ice slope and a training cart, and you can push down that, and they take your time similar to swimming. They'll take your 10-yard split, and they'll take your 50-meter split. So essentially, we'll say Joe X, who did good on his combine, he got invited to rookie push champs. That's 1 week where they teach you how to push. Essentially every day is, and they do it for skeleton athletes too, which if you don't know what skeleton is, that's a whole nother level of craziness. They basically are like solo bobsledders who go stomach down on these little trays and ride headfirst down. So they do the same combine. We're both governed by the same federation. So you go to rookie camp, you learn how to slide on the carts, whether you're skeleton or you're bobsled. And then at the end of the week, you have the rookie push championships, which is where all the rookies compete in the ice house. And the top performers from there may or may not get an invite into something called national push champs, which is typically held in the early fall. National push champs is something like the US Open for swimming. It's all prospective push athletes, whether they're rookies or Olympians, go in, and everyone does pushes on. Well, when we did it, and I had my first push champs about a month ago, we do the combine at the beginning because that's a recruiting tool. And then we do 1 day of individual pushing, so by ourselves on the push cart, 1 day of combos, so 2 people on a push cart, and then 1 day of triples, so 3 people pushing the ice cart. And that's basically to see who works with what. They take consideration of like your velocity. The other thing about bobsledding, which I'll go into, is that there's a certain, I guess, art or mathematics you have to do. For example, some athletes who might be bigger and stronger are really fast out of the 10, but they might need someone who's a little bit faster to bring them down the slope well. So I just say that they do the combos to figure out who's got the best compatibility together, and that's national push champs. From there, the pilots, who they work with the coaches and a selection committee, but the pilots actually have some input on who they choose their sled. And the pilots are essentially like mini captains. They do a lot of organization, they plan stuff, they'll choose who goes in their sleds. Pilots, so oftentimes they own their sleds outright, which is very expensive. They'll cost between like 50 to 100,000. But a lot of the pilots, they'll basically choose people from national push champs. They'll see your numbers, they'll see your combine scores, they'll put together their sleds. After that, a month later, they'll have something called national team trials, where all the sleds go against each other. And that's typically how they choose like USA 1, USA 2, I believe. I can't touch up on that because this was like an unusual year where we didn't have a national team trials because there's issues with the track. So, and I'll talk about like factors that favored me. So I was named to the team without doing national team trials because we couldn't do it. We used the prior year rankings, and we used individual pushing, combo pushing, and the combine score at a heavier weight than normal to help decide. So essentially that's the pipeline on how someone becomes a bobsled athlete. There's a lot of people who I wouldn't necessarily say they skip some of those steps, because they're already super athletic. Like, for example, someone might be an elite decathlete. A lot of decathletes have a lot of success in the sport. They might get directly invited or have like a quicker pipeline, say, hey, how about you come out here, see how you push, and they'll get straight right into it that way. So that's a typical pathway. You either combine for it NFL style, which you can basically Google, and you can find out whether you do it virtually or they're held around the country. Or sometimes some athletes, typically those with track backgrounds, sometimes get actively recruited by the federation.
Why would a decathlete be more fitted, or why do decathletes typically are more common, and that's in this sport, bobsledding?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guarantee if you go through like a lot of people there's people all over the sport. I'd say the bulk are track and football, but for some reason, just decathletes, I don't know if it's the high adaptability they have just from being arguably some of the most well-rounded athletes in track and field, or is it because they've got that great combination of just force production where they're able to just apply a lot of their force into their steps efficiently, along with enough of a speed to get the sled going? I mean, pushing, you have to be fast to do it, but it's interesting is that it's like it requires a certain amount of speed with a perfect amount of force production, with a perfect amount of strength. And you have, I don't know the answer, but there just seems to be a lot of decathletes who just have very, very quick ascensions into the sport, who pick it up quickly and they just can hit the sleds and push really well. I would probably say just because they're athletes who are not only very fast. I mean, we had a guy in my rookie camp who came out to me with national push champs. I got first at my rookie push champs, and he was right behind me, but he was much lighter than me, but wicked fast. I think he runs about like a 10.3, 10.4 100 as a decathlete, which is very fast. So he's got the speed, but being that they have to do jumping and throwing, they've got a lot of hip extension power. So I think maybe it's some combination of those two that decathletes uniquely develop from a very young age.
Gotcha. Okay, so you slipped this in there casually. You did a virtual combine or a virtual tryout, and then you went to the rookie champs and you won.
Yes.
How many people were at this rookie champs that you took first place in?
I'd have to see. We had it over 2 weeks. So like we had my group, there was maybe like 5 guys trying out for bobsled, a handful of guys doing skeleton. And then the week before was maybe 5 or 6 guys. So I'd say, I think like maybe somewhere between like 10 to 12 guys total. And then that was rookie. So I won for both weeks because we could see they had a spreadsheet on both scores. The guy who got second to me, who's become like a good friend of mine on the team so far, he got invited to national push champs. So I think me and a guy from the last rookie camp, so two people from my rookie camp and from two people from the week prior went to national push champs. But yeah, so I ended up winning my rookie camp, which was big. I guess surprise. I didn't know what to expect. I mean, no one in the group had ever pushed on ice before, and there was I could see through the virtual combine what some of the scores or some of the stuff that people who were going to the rookie camp had put up, and some of them were very competitive athletes. I mean, one of them, a guy who I'm friends with, and he's going to be sliding this season. I mean, he did a pause back squat with like 500 pounds with like a 3-second pause, heel elevated. Another guy, I saw him like jumping over 60-inch hurdles on his YouTube. So, I mean, I knew the field was going to be stacked with freak athletes. I mean, everyone on the team are just unbelievable athletes.
Mm-hmm.
But so to win that was really exciting for me. And that I didn't know for sure, but I was like, okay, this will probably get me to national push champs. Time to start working on my speed, time to take things to the next level. But that was pretty much, that was the rookie camp experience. Do you have anything more you want me to touch on?
What was your score for your for the combine?
Oh, for the combine? Oh, so I did pretty high. So you typically want, so we had like A, B, and C standards, and a lot of things are new because USA Bobsled Combine is completely like resetting or redoing their I guess their development standards. So we just built a new timing system in the ice house. So they're using that. They're using Ice House as like A, B, and C as the real standards, and they're slowly starting to phase out the combine for like development or national team athletes. They're still keeping the combine for people who are trying to get recruited.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's still a talent. So this year was the last year we did the combine. It's out of 800 points. You want to basically hit above 700 is the B standard, and that gets you funding. Above 740 is the A standard, and that is pretty elite. If you can do 740, like you're a pretty freaky athlete. So I did 712, I think. I could have done more. The reason why is the way the combine works is it's 2 days before individual pushes. So it's like if you had to do a weight room max out 2 days before like Olympic trials, you'd be like, I'm going to hold back a little bit. So you try to get as high as you can while like minimizing the amount of fatigue that you'll accumulate for individual push champs. So I did good in mine. The first event is the 4 running events. You run a 45 and they take your splits on it. My weakness is running. However, I did good enough where unfortunately I did the math. There was no way I was going to get 740. I think if I had gotten like 100%, I'd get like maybe 726 is my score.
Okay.
So I did that. Bear in mind the running is with a rocking start. So you start like half a meter behind the block in a 2-point start and you roll into it. So it's equivalent to like a relay start basically versus like a 3-point start off the blocks. So you get a little bit more, but the only split that I could say is going to be like understandable to people would be they took a 40-yard split of that just for the sake of everyone. I don't know why they did it because that's usually not, but with a rolling start, my 40-yard dash was 4.49. If I were to do it NFL style, it'd probably be like high 4.5s, maybe a low 4.6, just because that rolling start just gives you a little bit. And then I'd say if you want to get like perfect score on the running, like you have to be like running like in the 4.4s or lower, which some guys are perfectly capable of. But like for me at 235, that's a little hard to do. And then I did we did the underhand shot with toss. I got almost perfect score on that. I did the standing broad jump. We in the bobsled, you actually go off blocks. It's like maybe 2 inches high. So I jumped off like a 2-inch, so my toes could hang, but my standing broad jump was 11'6" on that. Which my best is like in the low. I think it's like 11.3 is like my best standing one. Power clean. And I had gotten all the points I needed to do at this point to be above 700. So I just kind of coasted, but then I just did like a 315 power clean. And then I did like a 405 squat triple, but that was like pretty modern. I don't want to sound like obnoxious, but that was like taking it easy for me. So
yeah,
I like took those because I was like, I'll be above 700. I was too slow to be above 740, which would like be really nice to get. So I just kind of coasted those two enough. I moved enough weight so it doesn't look like you're like disrespecting everybody, because everybody else, they're lifting weights. And I think everyone knows that like we're going to push individually. So if you like just cut that out super easily, it wouldn't look good either. So I had to be wary of that. But I mean, I had my buddy who, so the max score on the power clean is 335 and the max score on the squat is like 440. And one of my buddies who ended up winning the push competition, he had like his weight on the ground for a clean, and it looked like he just picked it up to standing. Like, have you ever seen people in the clean? They'll catch it like deep. He just like picked up the clean to front rack and like racked it on the rack. And I was like, oh, Martin's like warming up. He must have like, I don't know, like 90 pounds in the bar. He had like 335 on. So I was like, all right. So and he was just like, for him, it was like, oh, we got to get 150 clean. Just put it on the weights on the ground, rack it up, like put it back on the rack like instantly. So there's just absolute monsters. So I finished towards like I'd say probably middle tier as far as like the combine, enough to get my points. But typically, if you're like above 700, I mean, the closer to 800, that's great. But I'd say so USA one, which is the top tier guys, and those are the top 4 pushers. I mean, pretty much all of them, like if they feel like it, they go well over 740 on their scores.
Interesting. Okay. So you get a 712, you get to the rookie push champs, you win that. First of all, you said if you hit above the B cut, which is 700 on that combine, you get funding. What does that look like?
Yeah. So, sorry to clarify. So that combine I did a virtual combine to get into rookie camp. Mm-hmm. And then I did a rookie camp, one rookie camp, go to national push champs. They had me do the 8-event combine at the beginning of national push champs for everyone who wasn't an Olympian. So I did that a little bit after, and that was 2 days before individual pushes. That's kind of why some people will get as high as they can while holding back a little bit to hit the score. So funding, I mean, here's the thing that's tricky about the sport. I mean, bobsled's like, our coach was like reading, I could get the numbers wrong, but it's like one of the most expensive Olympic sports, period. I mean, sleds cost between $50,000 to $100,000. I was talking with my pilot about logistics. I'm like, hey, what meets or competitions are we looking to go to? There's some stuff in Europe. He was like, well, we're probably going to rent a sled out there because shipping our sled in total is going to be about $20,000. That a lot of it we'd have to divvy up. So a funded and unfunded, I mean, this is some stuff that like I'm still a little iffy on. I might get some things on, but I mean, some athletes, people more on the development team. So development team is like a tier below national team. Those are people who are who are prospective national team athletes. They're sliding, they're going to races, they're doing everything the same pretty much. They just do North America Cup, which is like domestic races. National team will go World Cup and then World Champs, or Olympics if it's the Olympic year. But USA 1, our USA 1 sled, they've got like full travel funding. USA 2, we don't have the same degree of funding. So when I say funding, that's like assistance. Like I need to be fact checked on this, but from my point right now, and I'm having a Zoom call with my pod, I believe that's kind of funding assistance on travel, food, some of the other expenses that add up so much in the sport. I mean, our coach joked it's a blue collar sport. When we're on competition, a lot of everyone who's there, like the push athletes, you assist with maintenance of the sled. You assist with moving the sled up, walking it up, just because expenses for the sport are super high. I mean, bobsled costs as much as like a luxury car. So that's typically what I'm referencing, and why some people try to strive to get higher numbers or land on a higher sled, because I mean, there's not a lot of money. There's a little bit, and it is very, very carefully allocated. You're held to a very high standard. It's very easy for you to get knocked out fast in the sport. So it's intense in that way, but that's typically what I'm referencing. And
yeah. So then moving forward, you mentioned some races in Europe, but what does the next year look like in terms of training, competition, and any goals you might have for this now that you're on the national team?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've never done a bobsled run in my life yet. This is like an unusual thing for me because we weren't able to do national team trials. So normally you'd have to do national team trials. That's when I would have done my first runs to have been named. So I've yet to be in a bobsled yet and do a run. I've just been in the ice house or the drylands track. So I mean, I'm doing my best to be as humble as I can and say what I am and say realistically where I'm at. But going forward, I mean, it's really about performing to the highest degree I can. I mean, there is some things that I wouldn't say nerves, but that I kind of keep me going, and that at the end of the day, I mean, I came into a spot. I'm on the lower tier of the pool as far as the 8 people who were chosen. And between me and a bunch of other guys, it was incredibly close. I had no idea who it could be. There were 6 other guys who my spot could have easily gone to, and they would have done exceptional. So I'd say the thing is basically trying to meet the expectations. And because to be honest, like a gamble was taken on me. I've never been on a bobsled run before. They had to essentially choose me knowing that don't quite have the race experience of some of the others. And that's a big expectation to kind of carry. And I wouldn't say a burden, but something that motivates me to say, okay, I got to answer and make sure that I fulfill the gamble and the expectations that was placed in me. Because at the end of the day, like I said, I've never gone down a run. A big fear that people have, and they like someone specifically told me, and I was like, it is a concern because we have people who they do their first bobsled run and they never do it ever in their life. They say that is not something that I ever want to do again. And so it's and when I talked about like the circumstances, I mean, I had a good combine score compared to some of the other guys. That weighed consideration into me getting named to the roster for this year and the other factors. But going to answer your question, I mean, our sled is, we actually have a meeting tomorrow morning where we're going to discuss kind of our plans of what competitions. For sure, we're doing Lake Placid, New York World Cup. We're going to do the Park City, Utah World Cup, and we're going to do our best as we can get good rental gear to go to World Championships in St. Moritz, that's in Switzerland, possibly a few World Cups in Europe shortly after. I think one in Eagles, Germany. That might be the name of the track or the location. I could be mixing it up. But and maybe one North America Cup race in Park City. But training and competition, for me personally, everything is a little bit subjective to who the athlete is. For me, I know what I need to work on. It's pretty much getting my speed up. I mean, I've got decent speed, but it's got to get higher for me to be able to maintain my spot, maintain my performance, and ultimately getting sliding experience. I've got to go back to Lake Placid. I know I've been flying from East Coast to West Coast on like a weekly basis, which is fatiguing, but I'm going back to Lake Placid this Sunday for a performance push camp. We're gonna try to get my pilot's gonna try to get his bobsled on the ice track, and it's just really gonna get that repetition of loading into the sled, getting comfortable running on ice, running down the slope, which is typically my weakness, and that's gonna be everyone's. If you've not, because I mean, imagine like running super fast, and if you're not super comfortable as a runner, might not being a swimmer, you might not develop that like bodily proprioception to the same degree as some other athletes. But jumping on a step that's like that big on a moving sled and jumping to one that's going super fast with a bunch of other guys, I mean, that's something that I've just got to get my time to handle. But I would say, to answer your question, I mean, it's basically getting my speed up is a personal goal of mine. And the nice thing is there's no shortage of guys on the team willing to help, or guys who are fast. I mean, Manteo Mitchell, who was a silver medalist in the 4x400 relay for Team USA, is on my sled. So in competition, and this is according, because I've never been on a competition, like I said, try to stay humble with what I can't say. But speaking to my pilot, it's like, we'll Airbnb a place, work out in the morning, gym in the morning, might take the sleds down a couple runs, 1 or 2. The problem with it's not like bobsledding's not like bobsledding down like a hill. It'll beat your body up pretty badly. So you have to be conscious of that. So, but I mean, I've got plenty of people who are super elite in track who probably will be of good help. I'm working on running. And then the other part of like my training would be really getting comfortable running down the ice slope and loading into the sled, which is the tricky part, but nothing that repetition won't fix.
Yeah. So in terms of a day-to-day lifestyle, certainly within this next year, you mentioned it, you're living in Santa Monica right now. Is training full time? Is this something you're doing, you're putting all of your eggs into, or are you still working? or do you have a job? What is your day-to-day going to look like?
Yeah, so this is, and I'm trying to do this to address kind of like the history and what got me into it, because like I said, to be honest, I've yet to compete. I've yet to go on a bobsled. I still have a lot of questions of what my career is going to look like over the next year. I'm probably best answering like the why and the how have gotten me to here. But to answer your question, I just started my new job. I'm working at Ernst & Young, which is a big accounting firm. And I'm working based out of the Los Angeles office, but training, I was, after USC, I went back home to Maryland. I finished my master's degree at George Washington University. I was working at the executive office of the mayor, so DC City Hall. And I was working in an office called the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Operations and Infrastructure. So a lot of the work I was doing was basically budgetary tracking of a lot of the federal federally funded projects like ARPA that were coming into the city to basically help with COVID. And we were using some of that money to fill into some of whatever infrastructure projects. So that was what I was doing for work. I don't want to go too much into that because I'm sure it's going to bore a lot of people around here about the bombs. And so I was like trying to cut myself off. I was like, don't talk about infrastructure projects for 30 minutes, but that's essentially what I was doing before. And during that, luckily I was doing my master's classes in the evening. I was interning during the week. I was like 25 hours during the school year. And then in the summer, I went to 40. So I still had time to manage for as far as training and stuff. I typically go to the gym in the split time I could outside of, I would work at like an Olympic lifting gym, do my clean squats and plyometrics. So I fit it in with that. But right now to be honest, like I said, it was early August is when I did my first rookie camp. I'm got named to the national team early last week. This is all very new to me. I got my job in advance. I'm working out with my managing director, how we're going to make this work. A lot of people on the team work 9 to 5s, and they'll just have to work remotely when they do their travels. I've got, like I said, the people at EY have been pretty supportive and pretty incredible. So it sounds like it's going to work, but unfortunately, this is all new. How I'm managing. I luckily enough, there's guys who do successful 9 to 5s on the team, and they just learn to work around it and manage it. And I'm sure I'll just take notes from any one of them and do my best to make it work. And I think I'm lucky enough to have a company that so far has been pretty supporting.
Nice. Yeah, I mean that's great context that you provided. Just the fact that a lot of the other guys on the team have 9 to 5 jobs. Because again, coming from the swimming sphere, don't know how bobsled works pretty much at all. But super exciting to hear about you starting this journey. I'm certainly looking forward to following you in whatever way we can. I do have a few more questions that are more swimming related.
No,
you mentioned, so you mentioned NCAP, which is your club team you grew up on. You mentioned Yuri, John Flanagan, and Bruce Gemmell. What was your training situation like? Did you train with all three of them? Did you have a certain site you would go to? Who is your primary coach growing up?
Yeah, of course. So my primary coach growing up, well, I would say, I guess in the beginning of maturity, I mean, I was at RMSC, Rockville Montgomery County Swim Club from a young age, and I had great coaches there who all played a big role in my development. I don't want to discount any of those people, even coaches who coached me in A, because they all play a big role. However, I'm just because we're talking about NCAP, I moved to NCAP when I was about 13. I was coached by Yuri Sugiyama up until sophomore year, until Yuri left to take the job at become an assistant coach at UC Berkeley. And I had a great relationship with Yuri. I loved that club. Some of my best friends in my life today are from that club. I attended a wedding of one of my buddies from that club. Saw one of my friends, Grant Goddard, swam at Harvard. So that was a big, like a definitive years for me. And then after Yuri took the job at Cal, Bruce Gemmell became our coach. He was my coach from sophomore year. Senior year, I switched to Flanagan, and I was training with Saliskar and John Shabbat at that club. And I mean, all these clubs are almost equidistant to each other. And we did a lot of joint practices with some of the clubs and stuff. But I would say that was the breakdown. 13 to sophomore year with Yuri. sophomore year to senior year to junior year with Bruce, and then senior year to summer, like before college with Flanagan. And all those were great in their own ways for developing me. They had different approaches and stuff, but I'd say all were complementary. They just had different focuses, which I'd say with Yuri, he was all about banging out Janet Evans sets and ripping 200 IMs and the annual swim and run, which was always a good time. Bruce definitely developed your endurance capacity. He was a big fan of like colors and kind of basically developing your ability. I think I would say he probably structured things around like the 500 free as like a model. I mean, maybe if he was here listening, he could probably correct that better, but at least from my memory, that's how I would say. And then Flanagan, he was very like 4IM centric and stuff, and that's to a certain degree what some of the sets would be around. So if you have any questions in particular, I can ask, but that was pretty much how I trained with through high school.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you got the full gambit of
Yeah.
famous NCAP coaches, which is
No,
really cool.
absolutely. Yeah.
So then you mentioned this earlier. I remember talking to you about it. I think it was your senior year, but you did a semester in Australia during your time at USC to get even more coaching experience. And we touched on it, but I'd love to dive into that and just again why you thought that would be a good thing for you and what ended up happening for you athletically during that semester, because I know you did some outside the box things just outside of swimming there.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of the misconceptions is like that I like didn't touch a pool at all, and that was not the case, and I probably would have like died coming back if that was. But there it was unconventional. So I mean, I was in like essentially I was in the major at the time that I'd switched later on, but it required like a semester abroad, and I was like, okay, well, I'll just knock this out fast. Like first semester junior year, there's not many big races as long as I stay in shape. I mean, Salo gave a lot of independence at practices. Like I said, I mean, we would do XYZ, a lot of stuff where you choose your own distance, choose your intensity. Obviously, there are some things where Dave would just be overwatching and looking at your stroke or your pacing. There'd be some things where he'll give you the flexibility to. So I'd proved both in my race results and how I did a practice that like, okay, when I'm doing my race stuff or like my practice stuff, I'll take that seriously and go fast. So there already was a level of trust established that I would come back and deliver the results. And took that seriously. I did not want to let down Salo. I was given a huge amount of responsibility and I guess privileged to do so. I even had nightmares when I was in Australia of me like drowning on a 200 breast. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to let that happen. So no, it was like a real thing. I would like close and I was like, oh my God, like get up. Oh, like call my friend up. I was like, let's go hit
the 175.
Yeah. So there was like an established relationship that allowed me to do that, I think is why. I mean, obviously these things are subjective decisions. It's going to vary athlete to athlete. When I went to Australia, you know, I was at University of Queensland, but I stayed at something called King's College, which is like a hybrid of like a dorm and a frat. So it's associated with the university, but it's like independent. Have you seen like the Hogwarts movies? Oh, no, sorry, Harry Potter. So they've got Hogwarts and then they've got the houses. It's like the house system. So mine was like 300 guys. It was very athletic. Like most guys there played a sport. I mean, it's Australia, so most people played rugby. Some people played AFL. But I was with a group of guys who I was very close with who were like super athletic, took fitness seriously. Like almost every day, we had a pool, we had a gym. Every day was training. So I had guys who they weren't necessarily elite level swimmers at the time. I contemplated actually swimming for UQ and going to their like university games and stuff, but I like pulled out last second because I was like, oh shoot, I'm gonna lose eligibility if I do that because that's competing for another team. So I was like, oh man, well that goes because everyone. I had a bunch of friends who were athletes. So like, oh, come to this like meet. It's like a great time. Like everyone goes, athletes of all sports. So I was like pumped for that. But I was like, oh man. So I was like, I have to be careful with that because I don't want to come back and say, hey, sorry, you just ended your eligibility, bye to your scholarship. So, but I played intramural water polo with friends that kept me in shape. I had friends who wanted to swim regularly. They grew up doing swimming. So I remember going to the pool with some people and they didn't necessarily go fast, but they still want to rip like 10 100s at like a certain pace. But I joined an Olympic weightlifting club that was coached by the Australian Olympic coach. And that was also that was what developed me as like a weightlifter, really, and going there and getting the programming and bringing my squad up. And then I was just super active. And Australians in general are just super, like their idea of fun's always going outside, throwing around a rugby ball, doing something. So it just, if you want to go to study abroad and be lazy, not do anything, don't do that experience, because you're not going to get that. So that, when I say unconventional, there was a degree of swimming, there's a degree of maintaining my fitness in the pool, maintaining my power. However, I think obviously the amount of yardage was dropped from say if I was swimming like 30 hours a week, like as per usual. But it wasn't like that hole was filled with lying on the couch and eating junk food. That would be, okay, we're going to increase plyometrics. Oh, we're doing more sprinting. Oh, I'm spending 3 days a week working on my Olympic weightlifting skills. So I do think that played a role in really kind of breaking my window or breaking some barriers as an athlete. I mean, obviously, I'm not a sports scientist, so I don't want to be like quoted by anything, but I think like everyone's got their windows in certain things. And I always viewed plyometrics and strength training as a way to raise your window and can kind of break you out into that next category as an athlete. And I think that's what my experience in Australia did for me. And I mean, looking back on it now, Australia, being with Dave Salo, the amount of the type of training we did, the style of training, I love the weight room. I mean, our head coach joke at bobsledding rookie camp was walking by and he was telling us like, being an athlete, like, he was like, don't think about it. You've all been training for this your whole lives. And he pointed at me, except maybe you. But like thinking back about it now, I think I was training for it longer than I was. And I think these events, these experiences, they kind of helped build the road to get me to where I was today, being named to the national bobsled team roster.
Way to bring it full circle, man. I think that's all the questions I have. I think that's a great a stopping point for us. Carsten, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and really dive deep into this whole journey that you have just started. Do you have any parting thoughts for our audience before we sign off today?
Oh, nothing really. I mean, one thing I would say is like, and this sounds so cliche, but like do whatever these things are that like sound crazy to you, that like you might even be like kind of reluctant to like even tell a family member about. I remember someone was like telling me, one of my girlfriend's friends, and super sweet girl, but she was saying like, oh, my mom was like talking to me. She's like, wait, she was so surprised you made the national team. She's like, I take back what I said. Like, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I thought he was like joking or making that up. So I mean, it sounds cliche, but I mean, like there's these ideas that sound crazy or sound goofy, or like when people might hear you say, oh, this is what I want to do, and they'll be like, like, are you serious? Are you taking that seriously? Like, you never know. You just got to go for it, and then it'll pan out, and then you can have the last laugh, not in the way of like getting back. And no one really ever doubted me, but like I said, I think when I said it 2 years ago without having anything on paper, they'll be like, are you serious about that? And the last thing, and I mean, I need to work on it, but a huge thing that really made the difference in me pursuing this was like the support of athletes who I reached out to who are on the bobsled team, whether I would DM them or ask for a phone call. Like, I was mind blown how many were like, hey, I'll talk to you. We'll talk about this. When I was done swimming, it was funny. Like I got a bunch of like, it was like a weird thing. Like I met a bunch of people who were like swimmers or former swimmers, and a bunch of them were like, oh, you're Carsten Vissering. Like it wasn't like necessarily about my swimming. It was like, oh, you got me into doing plows or box jumps or heavy weightlifting. So it's like, I do wish, like, if anyone sees this, I wish I could still have an avenue to like, if anyone wants any support, to say it. Unfortunately, I don't have social media right now, but I'm probably going to bring something back. But the other thing is, like, I mean, if anyone has any questions, if you like have even the slightest idea of like, oh, this is something I want to do, or you like doing this in the weight room and stuff or whatever, like feel free to ask. I'll pretty much answer anyone. And I enjoy those questions always.
Last question. We had a comment on the article about you being named to the national team. I think it was about you doing track your senior year of high school and winning a state title in the high jump or long jump.
Yeah, so I saw that comment, and I'm sorry if you don't have time, but I want to touch on some of the comments because that's something I wanted to say, because I've got some, if you got the time. So yeah, I'll touch on that one first. So I mean, you know who Davy Crockett is, right? like
Yeah.
the Western
The,
hero who
the
like jumped the
coonskin guy.
Quincy guy, he like jumped the Mississippi River. And I was like talking to my brother. I mean, legends are things that like expand over time. And that these little feats become crazy things. Like maybe historically, Davy Crockett jumped over like a 10-foot creek, which is still athletic. And then through the game of telephone, it became the Mississippi River. I did do like 2 or 3 meets. Like I just for fun, like I had a big jump even since high school. I remember like I think I jumped like just under 5 feet, like box jumps when I was in high school, or like 55 inches or something like that. So like one of the coaches like, hey, just lace up some shoes, put a singlet on, like rip some high jump, long jump with me. And I did that. And I did not, unfortunately, win a state high jump, long jump title, but I did some meets, had some fun with it. I think I like did right under 6 foot in practice, and high jump was like okay, but like not anything that would win like the state title. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I think I remember in practice. It wasn't meets were a harder time, but that's to answer that. And I don't want to like sidetrack too much, but I mean, like I was in Australia and I swam the Brisbane River, which is where our like campus, which no one should do. I'm pretty sure it's illegal. And they're bull sharks, and it's like the most polluted river ever. But don't do it. We were kind of, I don't want to get in trouble, but there was challenges to do so by an unnamed source. So I swam the Brisbane River, and at the time, like I was trying to bulk up, and because I was so active during the time, it was hard for me to preserve my weight and keep muscle. So I would drink like shots of coconut oil just to get the calories, coconut oil is dense in calories. My buddy was visiting me from college. He said they were like basically telling all these freshmen or people like, hey, here's the challenges, swim across the river. 2 years ago, this big American came over, walked to the pier, slammed a whole bottle jar of coconut oil, swam across the river and back. I'm like, so that's how I view it. It's like, it just took one thing for like, oh, the challenge is now like, I swam the river and back, and then I like was taking shots of coconut oil like that much in the morning, and then 2 years later I'm like chugging jars of coconut oil before doing it. I think that's kind of what happened with that comment. Someone probably heard that I had done like a couple like high jump or long jump meets and then involved in that, which I thought was funny. I always laughed at the comments. And the other thing that made me laugh was someone commented like 200 breast thumbs down or like bobsled thumbs up. I was messaging my buddy. I died laughing. I don't know who made it, but someone made a meme like my senior year, and they posted like my 200 breasts. First of all, I had like mega cramps, like the size, like if you were like, you could probably like break ice on like my quads, like on my 200 breasts, my like, because I got drug tested after my relay before at NCAA's, and my pee was so diluted because when I'm nervous, I keep chugging water. So it was so diluted for the drug test. I was in like the drug testing room past like 12 at night. And people were bringing me food to like dilute my urine so they could actually test it. And so I just got no sleep. Like I pulled like an all-nighter. I was so depleted because I didn't have time to eat anything really except for the few snacks they brought in. And I got like the worst cramps of all time on that 200 breasts I've ever felt. And so I like tanked that time. I think I got like, I don't know, 30 something, or like it was the place was not where my 100 was. And someone made a meme. It was like, it posted my 50 breast was like the fastest. It was like a 22.8 or something. And then they posted a screenshot of my 200 breasts. They're like, when you skip 200 breast workouts to post Instagram videos of box jumps. So someone posted that, and then I saw like the comment. I'm like, it's 3 years later, like it's still a meme. My 200 breaststroke. I love how it's got like 90 likes, so like it's still relevant. So I like messaged my buddy, my teammate. I'm like, I love how like my 200 breasts, because like obviously my teammates joked around about it. I love how my 200 breasts from senior year is still a meme. It's like you're a hero of the people. So that's something I took notice of that, and that gave me a good laugh.
That there were some good comments on this. That one was great. My other favorite one was someone saying 4 words: black mock turtleneck bobsled.
Yeah, that one was funny. And then someone was like, don't give Santo any ideas. Oh, like unironically, I don't know if he's watching this. I haven't been in touch with him in a long time, but like that is a total Santo thing to like do this like right after. So like if he like goes out and tries out, I would not be surprised at all. But the funny story about Santo, like my senior year, or maybe it was junior year, Santo was just kind of getting himself in better shape. I think he was a little bit his body composition was not quite the degree he wanted it to be at that time. So he was coming to me, he's like, I'm going to copy everything you eat all the time. I'm like, all right, sure. So we were in our dining hall. We come back from practice and I sit down and I've got like 3 chicken breasts and stuff, like some like fruit on the side, and he comes over and he's got like waffles or pancakes covered with like maple syrup and stuff. He like sits down, he like looks at my plate, he's like, damn it, walks away, throws away his food, comes back with like 3 chicken breasts, sits down right in front of me. And then we were in he missed the dual meet, and I'll tell you why. We were in the weight room doing like dumbbell bench press. And I think I was using like the 95s or the 100s with like the red band on it. And I'm like doing it. And he like walks over to me because we have to share the benches. And he's holding like 70s. And he sees my 95s and he drops his. And he's like, give those to me now. And I'm like, did you warm up? And he's like, no, just give them to me. He does it, like tears his bicep. So like arm is like
no.
So I laughed at that comment because I'm like, I would not be surprised if I get a message from Santo be like, hey, I'm on the Canadian bobsled team now. See you in Utah. Like that would not surprise me at all.
That's incredible. That's just so good. I'll never forget the black mock turtlenecks from 2018 NCAAs. That was like one of my favorite visuals from that meet, because like, you had Caleb going 17 at that meet. Like that was a crazy meet, but like you guys on the podium, the USC Tuner Medley Relay, like you and Santo and Glenta and number 4, like in the black turtlenecks, is like, this is such a look.
Yeah. And that was profound. And I was laughing with a friend and we like just out-touched Cal on that. But he was like, you guys are so lucky you won, because that would have not looked good if you did not win and you had the audacity to go out in the black turtleneck. So I didn't even think about that before the race, but I'm like, oh man, it is so good we pulled that up. But I'd say that relay is like definitively, like bar none, like my greatest experience in swimming. Like that was an unreal night. The energy in that was just truly incredible. And yeah, the black turtlenecks was funny. I think we were actually also considering Gucci flip-flops as well. we were like, because we got like a certain amount of money. I think like we got like 185 or something like that. And we could like use it however we wanted. I think the women's team did like shoes or something like that before. I don't know where we got the idea, but we had a lot of like free reign what we could put it to. And I think it was like Dylan Carter was like, we're gonna get Gucci flip-flops for the men's team. No money for any other gear, no hoodies, nothing, just Gucci flip-flops. And I was like, but I think we ended up selling on the turtleneck. We were originally going to do them actually in cream color, but I think we decided last second for the black, which is good because it looks better. And the funny thing, if you go inside like USC's athletic heritage hall where they've got all the trophies and the photos of the football players and all that stuff, like in the corner is like me, Santo, Dylan, and Glinta, like in our turtlenecks. I'm like, oh my god, I'm so glad that the turtlenecks was like worthy in like the Trojan Hall of Fame. So that was epic, and I think it was Dylan's idea. Santo went along with it. Probably had other crazy ideas as well that just were never vented. But that was an incredible time.
You've been listening to the Swim Swam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take Swim Swam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.